My name is David, and my story starts when I was just 9 years old. My parents, Mark and Lisa, divorced when I was a child, but they did their best to make sure that I never felt abandoned by either of them. They shared equal custody of me, so I spent my weekdays with my mom, who lived near my school, and weekends with my dad. I knew it wasn't ideal that they weren't together, but I understood that they both loved me deeply. That was enough for me. When I turned 11, my dad met a woman named Gina. She had twin daughters, Emma and Emily, who were 14 at the time. They had been raised without their father, and as a result, they often acted out in public. I could tell they were immature, throwing tantrums when things didn't go their way. As an introverted kid, I just quietly observed their behavior, not really wanting to be involved. After dating for a while, my dad and Gina decided to get married. I was 12 when they tied the knot, and even though it felt like a huge change in my life, I was hopeful. Maybe this would be a fresh start for all of us. Even my mom attended the wedding, showing her support for my dad's decision. At first, everything seemed fine. I thought Gina and I were getting along, and I was genuinely happy for my dad. But things started changing quickly after their honeymoon. One morning, Gina called me into the kitchen and said something that completely shattered me. She told me that she didn't really like me and that we had to pretend to get along for my dad's sake. She also said I needed to stay out of her way when my dad wasn't around because she couldn't stand having me around since I reminded her of my mom. Hearing her say that broke my heart, especially because I had actually wanted to have a good relationship with her. I had hoped we could become a family, but it felt like I had been betrayed before I even had the chance. From that moment on, things only got worse. The twins, Emma and Emily, overheard Gina's harsh words and started teasing me. They would tell me that my dad didn't love me and that he preferred them over me. I remember crying that night and telling my mom everything. She immediately called my dad, furious, but when she spoke to him, he refused to believe that Gina had said such things. He thought I had misunderstood. He promised my mom that it was just a phase, but the damage was already done. The next weekend, when I visited my dad, Gina acted like everything was fine. But as soon as he left, she came up to me again, this time with a more sinister warning. She told me that if I ever told my mom anything about what had happened, she would make sure I would never have a relationship with my dad again. She even threatened to divorce him and take all of his money, leaving him destitute. I was only 12, but I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was that I couldn't lose my dad. After that, Gina's treatment of me became more cruel. Whenever we were alone, she would say hurtful things about my appearance. She called me ugly, constantly reminded me how I wasn't good enough, and always made me feel worthless. Despite my dad being around, he never noticed. He truly believed that Gina and I had a good relationship. He thought that I was just being a typical teenager and that it was normal for me to act out. But I wasn't acting out, I was just trying to survive. My dad didn't understand that the person he had married, the woman he trusted, was making my life hell. She would force me to go shopping with her and the twins or eat out at restaurants, but the catch was that I was only allowed to have soup or dessert while they ate their full meals. I would sit there watching them eat, feeling humiliated and hungry. By the time I got home, I was so emotionally drained and physically weak, I didn't even have the energy to tell my dad about it. As the weeks went on, I became more and more withdrawn. Every Friday night, I'd try to come up with excuses to avoid visiting my dad. I'd pretend to be sick, making up stomach aches or headaches, hoping that he'd let me stay with my mom. But every time my dad would call, upset that I didn't want to see him. My mom would ask if something was wrong, but I could never bring myself to tell her the truth. I was afraid of Gina's threats and what would happen if I spoke up. At 14, my dad planned a family trip to Greece, hoping it would bring us all closer. My mom encouraged me to go, thinking it would be a good chance for me to see the world. Reluctantly, I agreed. It was the same routine. Gina pretended to care in front of my dad, but when he wasn't looking, she would subtly tease me. For example, whenever I'd talk about basketball, she'd say I wasn't tall enough to play, even though I was taller than most of my classmates. The twins would laugh and call me names like meathead, even though I had better grades than they did. Despite all of this, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to cause trouble. But one day I reached my breaking point. After a lot of teasing about my weight and height, I decided to stand up for myself. I teased the twins about their double chins and called Gina out for wearing a shrug over her bikini, which made her look like a penguin. That's when everything went wrong. After that vacation in Greece, I thought things might get better, but they didn't. The moment we got back, my dad confronted me about the incident. He was furious. The words Gina and the twins had spread about me were now an undeniable reality in his eyes. He was upset, not about the years of cruelty I had endured, but about my retaliation. He told me that I should never speak about a woman's weight or appearance, especially not Gina's. I argued back, reminding him that Gina and the twins had made countless remarks about my weight and my looks over the years, and that I had been patient with them for far too long. But my dad didn't see it that way. He believed Gina, insisting she was just teasing me. I was told to apologize to her for my misbehavior. When I hesitated, my dad became more agitated, insisting that I had been raised better than that. I had no choice but to apologize, even though it felt like a betrayal of everything I'd endured. Gina made a big show of accepting my apology, and the twins grinned, knowing they had won. They had successfully manipulated my dad into thinking that I was the problem. That night, when I returned home, I felt completely defeated. I told my mom everything, and she immediately called my dad. The conversation didn't go well. My mom was furious and tried to stand up for me, but my dad dismissed her concerns. He blamed me for the entire situation. He claimed I had misunderstood everything, that Gina's teasing was just her way of bonding with me, and that I was too sensitive. My mom was seething at this point. She didn't hold back and threatened to call Child Protective Services, CPS, on him if Gina ever made another comment about my appearance. My dad, fearing the consequences, promised to address it. From that point on, Gina stopped making direct comments about my weight, but the damage had been done. She and the twins started completely ignoring me when my dad wasn't around. I was isolated, alone in a house where I was supposed to be part of a family. At 16, my mom went away for a few days, so I stayed with my dad and Gina. I was trying to be polite, despite everything. I even decided to cook dinner one evening, thinking it might be a nice gesture. I was good at cooking because my mom had taught me from a young age. I made a meal that I hoped everyone would enjoy. Gina, of course, didn't appreciate my efforts. She complained that it was one more person to cook for. But I didn't let that discourage me. I set the table and served dinner, and to my surprise, my dad and Gina's friends loved the food. My dad even offered to do the dishes afterward, leaving me a moment to retreat to my room. I heard Gina and her friends chatting outside my window, and their words made my blood run cold. They were talking about how lucky Gina was to have such a good husband and a nice house, but then they mentioned my cooking. Gina launched into a tirade about how annoying I was and how much she couldn't stand having me around. The worst part? Gina admitted she had hoped I would fail at cooking so she could blame me for ruining dinner. That hit me like a ton of bricks. Despite all the things she had done to me, I was still trying to be nice, still trying to fit into the family. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. The next few days were uncomfortable. Gina continued to ignore me, while the twins made sure to rub it in my face every chance they got. I felt like a ghost in my own family, only existing when I was needed to be a scapegoat for their misery. Even though I tried my best to stay out of their way, it never seemed to matter. Every time I made an effort to connect, it was only met with mockery. When I turned 21, things reached a boiling point. My dad invited me over to his house, saying he had some important news to share. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew it had been a while since I last saw him. I thought maybe this was his way of trying to reconcile with me, maybe to finally acknowledge everything that had happened. But as soon as I arrived and saw Gina's smug face, I knew something wasn't right. The evening started like any other family dinner, with my dad talking about how proud he was of us all. But then he casually mentioned the news. He had made a will. My stepmother, Gina, was thrilled when my dad explained that he had decided to leave the house to her. I tried to stay neutral, but I could feel the tension in the room. Gina and the twins were gleaming with excitement. Meanwhile, I was left feeling like an outsider, even though I was about to inherit something significant from my father. But that feeling was fleeting as my dad quickly turned to announce the real issue. My dad then said he'd left his vintage car to me, a car that meant the world to him and me. This was the one thing that held sentimental value between us. It was a symbol of our bond, and I thought it was his way of showing that he still cared. But when I looked up at Gina's face, I saw nothing but contempt. The tension in the room was unbearable. The twins had already voiced their discontent, saying that they deserved more, and that I didn't need the money or the car. Gina quickly jumped in, subtly suggesting that as a man, I should be able to make my way in the world without any help. They argued back and forth, but my dad insisted his decision was final. As the evening continued, Gina suddenly broke down into tears. It was a tactic I'd seen before. She started claiming she had been holding in her frustration for years to protect the family, but now she couldn't stay silent any longer. The room went cold as she accused me of something unimaginable: assault. As Gina's words hung in the air, I felt my heart stop. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My stepmother, whom I had quietly endured for so many years, was now accusing me of something vile, something unthinkable. She claimed that I had tried to assault her, that I'd made her feel unsafe in her own home. The entire room seemed to freeze with everyone waiting for my response. I sat there in disbelief, unable to speak. Gina continued her tale, describing a completely fabricated incident. She claimed that after our argument in Greece, where I had snapped back at her for her cruel comments about my weight, I had become fixated on her. She told my dad that I had been watching her inappropriately, following her around the house, and even trying to enter her bedroom when she was alone. Each accusation was more outrageous than the last. She painted a picture of me as some kind of monster preying on her for years. I tried to speak to defend myself, but the words caught in my throat. How could anyone believe such a monstrous lie? How could my dad, the man who had raised me, believe this woman over his own son? My dad seemed torn, his face a mask of confusion and concern. He glanced at Gina, then at me, trying to process the claims. I could see that he didn't know what to believe, and that stung more than anything else. The twins, of course, sided with their mother, yelling at me and accusing me of things I hadn't done. Their words stung, but nothing hurt more than the look on my dad's face. He asked me if what Gina said was true, and I vehemently denied it. But it didn't seem to matter. Gina's performance was convincing. She had manipulated him for years, and now she had made him doubt his own flesh and blood. My dad's next words shattered me. "I think you need to leave." He turned to me looking broken, but his words were firm. He asked me to leave the house until the situation could be resolved. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father had chosen her over me. That was the moment I realized the family I thought I had, the one I had fought so hard to keep together, was lost. I packed my things and left, not knowing where I would go next. The days that followed felt like a blur. I spent my time at my mom's house, trying to make sense of the betrayal, trying to comprehend how my dad, the man who had been my hero, could have believed Gina's lies over his own flesh and blood. The fact that he had asked me to leave the house, his house, made me question everything I had ever known about my relationship with him. But the hardest part was not the fact that I had lost my father, it was the emotional toll this had on me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being discarded, pushed aside as if I didn't matter. My dad had let Gina tear apart our family, and worse, he had sided with her. I couldn't understand how he could allow someone like her, who had never shown any real care for me, to manipulate him so completely. I spent sleepless nights, lying awake in my bed, thinking about the conversation, the accusations, the way Gina had spoken so convincingly about me. The worst part was how quickly she had turned my dad against me, painting a picture of me that was completely fabricated. All I had ever done was live my life, be a decent person, and try to get along with her and her daughters. But that wasn't enough for her. I had become a threat, a piece in her game of manipulation. A few weeks later, I got a call from my dad. I almost didn't pick up. Part of me wanted to hold on to my anger and walk away from him completely. But something stopped me. Maybe it was a small part of me that still wanted to believe he was the dad I had known before Gina came into the picture. When I answered, my dad's voice sounded different, older, more broken. He asked if I was okay, and I could tell he was trying to tread lightly. I was silent for a moment, unsure of how to respond. He then confessed that Gina had been cheating on him. My mind reeled as he explained how he had finally confronted her, only for her to admit that she had fabricated the accusations about me, that everything she had said was a lie. It felt surreal. My dad, after all this time, was admitting that he had been wrong. He sounded truly remorseful, even desperate. He apologized for not believing me and for cutting me out of his life. He told me how much he regretted trusting Gina and how devastated he felt for allowing her to destroy our relationship. But it was too late. His words were like empty promises now. The years of pain, of feeling rejected by the person who was supposed to protect me, couldn't be erased with an apology. I wasn't sure what to say, so I stayed quiet. He pleaded for my forgiveness, but I could hardly bring myself to look at the situation with any compassion. I told him that I couldn't just pick up where we left off, that I had to think about everything that had happened. My mom was the only one who had been there for me, supporting me, believing me when no one else did. She had always been my rock, and I had to focus on that bond, not on trying to salvage something with my dad that no longer felt genuine. I ended the call, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had just heard. My dad's guilt and regret couldn't undo the years of hurt he had caused. Gina had won, and I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to forgive either of them. But one thing was certain. My life had to move forward. The past was behind me now, and I couldn't let it define me anymore. It was time to start over, to build a new life without the toxic influence of Gina and without a father who had failed to protect me. The days that followed my conversation with my dad felt surreal. Part of me wanted to hate him for choosing Gina over me, for abandoning me when I needed him most. But another part of me couldn't help but wonder if this was the only way forward. Cutting ties with the past and rebuilding my life without the toxic presence of my stepmother and the man who had once been my father. I had to admit, the emotional burden of the years I spent being manipulated, controlled, and mistreated was far heavier than I had realized. For so long I had pushed down my pain thinking that it would just go away with time. But it didn't. Every time I saw Gina's face or heard her voice, it triggered memories of the cruelty she had shown me. And it wasn't just her. My dad had allowed it to happen. Worse, he had believed the lies she told about me and chose to believe her over his own son. That hurt more than anything. I spent the next few months trying to rebuild myself. I knew I had to focus on healing, but the pain was still raw. I began seeing a therapist, someone who could help me process the years of emotional neglect and the deep sense of betrayal I was feeling. At first, it was difficult. Talking about what had happened with Gina and my dad made me feel exposed, like I was reliving all of those painful moments. But slowly I started to feel like I was gaining control again. The therapist helped me see that it wasn't my fault. I had done nothing wrong, yet I had carried so much guilt for things that were out of my control. During this time, my mom was my biggest supporter. She stayed with me when I needed her the most, often flying across the country to visit and remind me that I was loved. The more I opened up to her about my feelings, the more I realized how deeply she had been affected by everything that happened with my dad and Gina. I had always known she was strong, but seeing her stand by me through all of this gave me a newfound sense of gratitude. She was the one who helped me see that family isn't just about blood. It's about who is there for you when you need them most. It wasn't just my mom who helped me heal. I also began to notice how much support I had from the friends I had kept close over the years. They were there for me, offering kindness and understanding. And as I leaned into those relationships, I started to see just how much I had been missing by holding on to the past. I had surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared for me and respected me for who I was. One of the biggest changes in my life came when I met Mara. We met through a mutual friend at a party, and there was an instant connection between us. She was kind, funny, and compassionate, but most of all, she listened. I had never met someone who truly understood the weight of what I had been through. Mara made me feel like I could be myself without fear of judgment or rejection. She accepted me fully, flaws and all, and she didn't ask for anything more than what I was willing to give. Mara became my support system in a way that I never thought was possible. We talked for hours about everything, about my past, about the things I was still struggling with, about the pain of losing my father. And the more we talked, the more I realized that I had been holding on to a toxic relationship with my dad out of a misplaced sense of obligation. My dad had made his choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started a new job, something I had always dreamed of but never had the confidence to pursue until now. I even began to consider the idea of moving away from the city, seeking a fresh start in a new place. As much as I wanted to make my dad see how much pain he had caused, I knew that I couldn't change him. His actions had shown me that he was not the person I had always believed him to be, and that realization was heartbreaking. But I had to let go. Letting go of him meant freeing myself from the past and moving forward with my life. Mara and I started making plans for the future. We discussed everything, our goals, our dreams, and the life we wanted to build together. I felt a sense of excitement that I hadn't experienced in years. I was no longer defined by the family I had lost. I was defining myself now, and I was surrounded by people who truly cared for me. And then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my dad. It had been nearly 7 years since I last spoke to him, and I couldn't believe he was calling me now. He sounded different, older, tired, and broken. He wanted to apologize, to explain that he had realized the truth about Gina and her manipulations. My heart dropped as he told me how she had been cheating on him for years and how, after confronting her, she had admitted to fabricating the accusations against me. At that moment, I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to scream, to let him know how much damage he had done. But another part of me felt a sense of numbness. I had already moved on. My life had already started to rebuild itself, and I realized that his apology, while long overdue, wasn't enough to undo the years of hurt and confusion he had caused. I told him that I didn't want to have anything to do with him. I didn't need his apology. What I needed was for him to have stood up for me when I needed him most, and he didn't. That was something I would never be able to forgive. I ended the call, my heart heavy but resolute. The past was behind me and I was moving forward, with or without him. After everything that had happened, I had made my decision. My father's actions, or rather his inaction, were the final straw. For 7 years, I had tried to make sense of the betrayal, tried to make sense of a father who chose to believe a lie over his own son. I had hoped that one day he would come to his senses, that the truth would reach him. But that day never came. When he finally reached out to me, his apologies felt hollow. His tears didn't change the reality of what I had gone through. I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. Not after all the years of abuse from Gina, not after the way he abandoned me when I needed him the most. For 7 years I had no father. I lived my life, quietly suffering, always looking over my shoulder, fearing that I would be falsely accused again, that I would lose everything I had worked so hard for. It was a horrible, suffocating feeling. When my father confessed that Gina had been cheating on him, when he revealed that everything she had done was driven by her greed and jealousy, I felt a strange mix of anger and relief. The truth was out, but it didn't change anything. My dad was just another victim of Gina's manipulation. He had chosen her over me, and that was something I could never forget. Even though he wanted to rebuild our relationship, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too late. He had abandoned me without hesitation. I couldn't trust him anymore, and I wasn't sure I ever would. I blocked him, and I made it clear that I had no interest in being a part of his life. His actions had been too damaging, too hurtful. My life was better without the constant reminders of betrayal. And so, I moved forward. Mara, my mom, and my friends helped me rebuild. They stood by me when I felt like everything was falling apart. With their support, I found peace. My life now was focused on my own happiness. I had a future to look forward to, one that didn't involve my father or Gina. I was free. Looking back, I realized that sometimes the people we love the most can hurt us the deepest. But in the end, the love we give ourselves is what truly matters. And that's what I hold on to now. The story highlights the profound importance of self-worth and the consequences of toxic relationships. It demonstrates how, even when those we love and trust make mistakes or betray us, it is essential to prioritize our well-being and mental health. The narrator's decision to distance himself from his father, despite the years of emotional turmoil and the eventual truth, teaches the value of recognizing when a relationship is no longer healthy, regardless of the emotional ties that bind us. For an elderly audience, this story reminds us that we all have the power to define our own boundaries and protect ourselves from emotional harm, no matter how deep-rooted the relationship may be. Trust, once broken, can be difficult to rebuild, and sometimes, letting go is the best way to protect our peace. It's important to cherish those who truly support and care for us, and to acknowledge that it's never too late to prioritize our own emotional well-being. Moreover, it is a reminder that we are not defined by the actions of others, especially when they are rooted in falsehoods or selfish motives. Healing and rebuilding are possible with time, self-reflection, and the support of those who love us. Our worth is not determined by the mistakes of others, but by our own capacity for growth, resilience, and self-compassion. Ultimately, peace comes from within, and we must be willing to walk away from toxicity to find it. Thank you so much for watching. If this video resonated with you or gave you some valuable insight, please comment 1 below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends or family if you think they could benefit from it as well. Your support means the world to us, and we appreciate every single one of you. Also, feel free to share how the video made you feel. We love hearing from you. Until next time, take care and remember to prioritize your peace and well-being.